Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on Create Perfect Value Propositions. Really delighted that you can all join us here today. We've got a very popular session with over 500 people registered, and I can see people continuing to log in as I'm talking. My name's Ben Swanson, and I'm the Global Events Director at IFA Pharma. I'm in London, and I'm very pleased to be joined by some very fantastic individuals from both the UK and Spain. We brought them together so they can give contrasting regional perspective views. Now, we've got a fair bit to get through today, so I'm going to try and keep things moving. But I do want to say thank you to both our speakers, Jose and Mark, for joining us today. It's fantastic to be able to borrow their time and hear their insights. As I mentioned previously, this is a perfect opportunity for you to send questions directly to the payers. So please do type your questions into the message box as and when you think of them. To get the ball rolling, I'm going to start with a few polls. You should be seeing your first poll on the screen now. So the first question is it easy to meet the payers you want to meet? And then we'd ask you to select one answer. Yes, I never have trouble getting to the payers I want. It's difficult, but I generally eventually meet those that I need. Or no, I have more failures than successes. Or no, I can never meet the right people, or I don't even try and meet payers. If you wouldn't mind voting now. Perfect, I can see the responses coming in. That's great. I'm going to give it a little bit longer. Okay, and if we count down 3, 2, 1, then we should be seeing the results on the screen now. So it looks like the majority is difficult, but I generally eventually meet those that I need, which is pretty much what we were expecting to see, which is why we're sort of bringing this webinar together, so you have that opportunity to really get in front of the payers and really ask the questions you want to ask. So let's move on to the second question. Should be popping up on your screen any second now. And the question is, do you think payers are willing to align themselves with you to produce mutually beneficial outcomes? Your options are yes, all the payers have an open mind and are flexible, or yes, the majority are, but not all, or few are, but I think they should be more willing, or no, not at all, we're never aligned, or I don't engage with payers. So please do a vote now. Perfect, I can see the votes coming in. If we've got anyone else left to vote. It's great, I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, and then close the poll. Perfect, so the results we've got are that half the people think that they should be more willing to engage. Again, another good example why we're putting this together. And interestingly, no one has said that all the payers have a flexible mind, so obviously that's something that we'll hopefully reflect across when we're talking to the payers that are here who are quite interested in sort of working with you. Okay, so moving on to the third poll. You should see the question now. How much will your time, money, and focus on payer engagement strategies increase over the next 3 years? Your first option is that it'll increase more than 10%, or it may increase 1 to 10% is your second option. Neutral, it may stay roughly the same. Or will it decrease by 1 to 10%, or decrease by more than 10%? Please vote now. Perfect, we've got the votes coming in. So if I count down for the closing of this one, 3, 2, 1. And as you can see there, we've got a staggering increase more than 10%. It's 58% of people's votes. So that's obviously, clearly the route that it's going to be going. So that's very interesting to see that. And hopefully the payers we've got with us today will be very happy to see that as well. So perfect. That's it for my questions for now. So thanks for contributing to those. But what I really want to see is questions from you guys. So please do ask questions throughout. You should see a box on the right-hand side where you can type in your queries. And I hope that each of you will send in at least one question during the session. Please do. Just so you know, a recording will be available for this webinar, and we will send that out after the event. So don't worry about that. That'll go out next week. So now, to introduce our panelists, they should be listed in front of you. Firstly, we've got Jose Luis Sanchez-Chora. He is the Subdirector of Pharmaceuticals for the Extremadura Health Service in Spain. He also sits on the National Pricing Committee as well. He's involved in creating very interesting new approaches to clinical trials within his region at the moment. So that's a very interesting side, which is why we've got him here. And then we have Mark Wilkinson as well, the Chief Executive of the Barnsley Clinical Commissioning Group, which is part of the NHS. Mark previously worked as the Director of Life Sciences and Innovation, where his role was specifically working with creating payer engagement strategies. So he tries to bring this to his new role wherever possible. So let's head straight over to Mark to start us off. Mark, we're just going to bring you into the conversation now. And we're going to give you control of the presentation now as well. So we should be able to hear you, Mark, if you want to say hi.
Okay. Hi, thanks so much, Ben. Good afternoon. So my name is Mark Wilkinson. I'm the Chief Officer of NHS Barnsley CCG. As Ben said, I will just load up my presentation, let you see that, and then we can get started.
Thanks, Mark. I'll leave it to you.
Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, and thanks for joining us on this this webinar this afternoon. So my brief was to speak for about 10 minutes on the subject of creating perfect value propositions. We're not accepting anything else other than perfect value propositions this afternoon. I think the brief that you've all signed up for is in the bottom left-hand corner of that slide. I'm clearly not going to address the second bullet point. I am going to try and address bullet points 1 in that box. It's probably not too important to you to know very much about Barnsley, so I'm not going to major on that. Suffice to say that if you are interested, it's a small town in South Yorkshire, in the north of England, and we commission health services on behalf of about 250,000 people that live in Barnsley and surrounding areas. I wanted to actually use not kind of slides I've developed specifically for this session, although there are some of those, but actually share a little bit of the way in which, when I'm talking to other audiences, I actually introduce the CCG. Not because I think it's important that you know about Barnsley, because I don't really think it is, but I thought it might be helpful to just hear a little bit about how we talk about the organisation that we are creating. Before I get into that, I should perhaps say that, as like all the other clinical commissioning groups in England, we came into full force on the 1st of April this year. So we've actually just come towards the end of our first 100 days. So we are a very new organisation, and in terms of our responsibilities, we are responsible for commissioning local health services that meet the needs of the people of Barnsley. We do not commission primary care, GPs, dentists, etc., under the new arrangements. Neither do we commission more specialised, or what you might describe as tertiary health services. Those are commissioned by other new NHS organisations. So we commission the local health services. We have a budget of about £350 million per annum to commission health services that meet people's needs. And the way in which we talk about what we're trying to do is this. This is what we say. We are a clinically led commissioning organisation that is accountable to the people of Barnsley. We're committed to ensuring high quality and sustainable healthcare by putting the people of Barnsley first. So I think that offers some clues as to the things that we think are important to us. And we're trying to pull off quite a difficult trick. We're trying to be clinically led, more so than perhaps previous NHS commissioning organisations. We certainly want to be publicly influenced, and of course we need to be managerially enabled. And I guess my role is in delivering the last of those. It's a managerial enabling function. This is a description of Barnsley, but this actually applies to pretty much the whole of the north of England. So, you know, don't take it as Barnsley knowledge. Do take it as being something about the language and in terms of the way we describe our challenges. But this is very common, probably actually with much of the rest of England, and that's why I've decided to use it. And I suppose what's interesting is that through these slides, you know, we don't particularly talk about things like value. We don't particularly use words like value propositions and those types of things, although I appreciate these are very powerful terms for pharma colleagues. But this is Barnsley. It's a growing and increasingly elderly population. We've got widening health inequalities between our people and the rest of England. Not only are we not closing the gap in terms of life expectancy between Barnsley and the average for the rest of our nation, but that gap is actually widening. In part, that's because of the next bullet point, high levels of deprivation. They're not going to be helped over the next few years by the significant challenge that all NHS commissioners, the entire NHS faces and the broader UK public sector. We've got high levels of hospitalisation, and we have high levels of premature and we think avoidable deaths, principally from cancer and cardiovascular disease. So when we talk about our town and thinking about the words we use and the needs of the people we serve, that's how we would characterise it. What's leading to all that premature and avoidable mortality? Well, if you wanted to see it in a kind of picture format, it's pretty clear what's doing that. Smoking, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and all those other factors. And I've put this slide up because I quite like it because it's a graphical kind of image, but also because I feel that one of the challenges for all of us, as I put there in quotation marks, the challenge for many organisations is to keep the main thing, and not be wandered off by not to wander off down potential blind alleys or to be distracted by other factors. So when we think about what is the main thing for us, then I would describe it in those terms for those reasons. Just want to get a little bit more specific now, and I just want to focus on this phrase, the perfect value proposition. That's actually what we're aiming to produce. And I think at a general level, I think there are three key points that I would want to make in terms of thinking about particularly getting to the perfect value proposition. And I think beginning on the left-hand side, the first thing I would say is that I think it doesn't come out of the ether, if you will. It's actually built on a solid business-to-business relationship between the pharmaceutical industry, between individual pharmaceutical companies, and ourselves as an NHS organisation. So what characterises that business-to-business relationship? It's a deep level of trust. It's about contact across all functions and at all levels. So it's knowing each other, being able to pick up the phone to each other, and it's also about understanding of our shared strategic objectives and how we work. And I think that the perfect value proposition in particular can only be built on that kind of business-to-business relationship. I wonder if actually before we get to the perfect value proposition, I wonder if we actually need to do some work to actually define a shared value framework before we come to a specific proposition. And I think the answer to that question is yes, we do. Do we have a clear view about what value looks like when we treat people who suffer from diabetes? When we're talking about cancer services and new medicines to treat people suffering from cancer, do we have some kind of shared value framework? I think there are some projects, including some that I've been involved with in my previous role, where industry and the NHS and actually other European payers came together to have a go at developing these shared value frameworks which are condition specific. And to my mind at least, it would be helpful if we'd got those before we actually moved on to defining the perfect value proposition. And then the final point, which in a sense builds on my two previous points on this slide, it is simply to make the case that we innovate together. If we accept that the perfect value proposition is going to be something that moves both of us forward, that is advantageous both to industry and to your requirements, and also to meet the needs of the NHS and the people, the patients to whom we're all ultimately accountable, this is something that we need to do together. Innovation requires collaboration, and that's about strong connections between customers and suppliers. Wanted to say just a little bit about where do medicines fit in for me as somebody who works in a clinical commissioning group. I think we probably spend around £60 million each year of our £350 million budget on medicines. The bulk of that goes on medicines that are prescribed in primary care, prescribed by family doctors in our area. But we also fund NHS providers, hospitals, who clearly provide hospital medicines that are prescribed in hospital and that kind of stuff as well. So I think in total it's about £60 million each year that we spend on medicines. We tend to come in the context of the NHS after NICE has determined that a medicine is effective, and there's a whole set of HTA processes that I don't think we are really very close to. I suspect Jose is going to touch on this a little bit more, but we are really after that, I suppose. And we are a commissioner of health services and a funder of medicines. So as such, I would say that we're interested in medicines, but we're also interested in services that are connected to medicines. And I want to go on to give an indication as to what some of those might be. And above all, we're actually not interested in medicines, we're actually interested in outcomes. In terms of the relationship that we have with the pharmaceutical industry, some of this stuff is around what I think what you would describe as non-promotional collaborations, but we've also entered into contracts where we have paid pharma companies to come in and deliver services to improve patient care that has perhaps been connected to medicines, but actually is not solely about prescribing. There can be some broader stuff as well. And my final point on this slide is simply to make the point that for me, I think there was something about comparatives for medicines. For me, medicines need to stand comparison to any other choice that we could make in terms of how we use our resources. We have a phrase, making better use of the Barnsley pound, and we don't have an amount of Barnsley pounds that we think we wish to allocate towards medicines. So to address the question directly, what do we need to see in the value proposition? I feel slightly embarrassed about this slide in some ways because we are a new and emerging organisation, and I don't think particularly that this is hugely sophisticated, but nonetheless, in the interest of sharing with you, where we are, we don't yet talk very much about return on investment or those kind of terms, but clearly filling in a business case template or a business case document, which is where these headings are taken from, would allow us to produce some kind of return on investment calculation. So what are we looking to see in a value proposition? Well, it's all those headings. I'm not going to talk you through each of them, but kicking off with purpose and rationale and the evidence, and then moving through to, at the end, cost estimates, timescales for delivery, and what other options have been considered. So I'd be interested in your reaction to this. As I say, we have a business case template, and that's really the most I could offer to you in terms of how would we evaluate a value proposition that you would put to us. I think we will and probably do need to get more sophisticated. So, for example, we talk on the middle lines about anticipated quantitative and qualitative benefits. We don't draw much of a distinction, but I think we need to, between the benefits that impact on us as a CCG, the benefits that impact on, say, the health and social care system in Barnsley, and the broader societal evaluation. But we're not currently at a level of sophistication where we would differentiate between benefits that would be present for different elements of the system. So that's our current answer to that question. I think it probably needs to get a bit more sophisticated. And then my final slide is simply to identify what I believe are some of the opportunities for collaboration between the pharmaceutical industry and the NHS and of course the Clinical Commissioning Group. So I looked at our commissioning plan, I looked at our business plan for this year, and I distilled down all our priorities and all these activities, and I tried to place them in kind of fairly general terms. And I distilled our commissioning plan down into this 3x4 matrix that you've got on this final slide. I think these are the opportunities for us to work together. Some of these can be directly related to medicines. Others of them are perhaps bigger and broader points. But I would see those as being the key opportunities for collaboration. So with that, I've concluded the kind of formal content that I wanted to deliver. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand back to yourself, Ben.
That's perfect. Thanks for that, Mark. It was really great to get your perspectives on there. And we've got a few questions coming in. Really keen to get more coming in as well. So if you did have any opinions on those opportunities for collaboration, if you wanted to ask a specific question about how that might work, then now is the time. Please do fire those questions in. And as we bring in Jose into the equation now, let's just connect him with his slides in a second. Jose, we've just brought you live, so if you wanted to say hello there.
Hello.
Hi, Jose.
Hi.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it over to you as soon as the slides have appeared, okay?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I begin now? Okay. Hello.
Perfect.
Hello,
There you go,
thank
Jose.
you.
I'll leave it to you now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Hello. Hello, everybody. Thank you. I must say that I don't speak English very well. I'm so sorry. I will try to do my best. The first thing I must say is that we have no money here in Spain actually, especially here in all Europe, but especially here. So everything I say is under that problem. We have no money. No, don't forget that, okay? We have 3 key areas that may influence my reimbursement decision. First is of course the patient. We need to improve the patient health, but we need to do that in real life, not in our laboratory trials. We need measurable improvements, and we can't forget that statistically significant is not the same as clinically significant. We want to have our patients cured as possible, not with better indicators, but not better health. The second item is when we have a new drug, is that it must be better than. A new drug should be better, not as good as. It should be better. Better clinical results, better security, better route of administration, anything but better. I don't like this me too. We need something new because we have many things now. And of course, as I said before, money. How much does it cost, and how much can we pay? That's the problem, a real problem now. Because we have no money, as I have said. I think we can't pay 100,000 euros for 2 or 3 months of life. And what quality of life? Will the new treatment remove previous treatment? That may be good for us. The clinical improvement worth that price? I don't know, I hope so. That's very important for us. Okay, so what do I want? When I say I want, I mean what do we want to see from you, from the pharmaceutical companies? It's very simple. Is your product better? How much better? How are you demonstrating clinically that it will cure more patients? I had put this example, density bone and hip fractures, because I don't mind really my density bone if I'm having a fracture. So we must go to the end point, not the intermediate points. Again, I ask you pardon by my bad English. I'm improving really well. How much can we pay for it? How much? If I am paying now 100 for treating a patient with any pathology, I will pay now 100 or I have to pay 200, and the patient will be more or less in the same condition. Can we negotiate? Now in Spain, surely you know, we have the National Price Commission in the Health Ministry, but later can we negotiate, especially if your drug isn't working? What can we do with that? Why must be more expensive? Why almost every new drug is more expensive than the previous one? I know that investigation, anything, but if I having the same result, the same outcome, I think we can't pay anymore. That's maybe important. What will encourage me to pay really more? when some pharmaceutical company says, we have this new drug, we are sure you will like it because it's very good. I need to have clinical results clearly better than its comparator, but not placebo, please. Better than its comparator, clinically better. Maybe we can save money in clinical procedures, of course. It's difficult to have an account of the indirect savings, but we can try. And we try to look at the whole treatment, but the whole treatment, not the cost per day, but the whole treatment, the real whole treatment, because sometimes we have information. This is only a treatment for 2 or 3 months. When you go to the hospital, you can see that the patient have 4, 5, 6, and almost a year with this treatment. That's a problem for us. This is something that we are trying to do. Could we share risks? If everywhere we are sharing risks, but not in the drug world, okay? Could we establish a top figure of expenditure, but not patients, top money? I always try to, when I have a meeting with some pharmaceutical company, they say, well, you will have only 80 patients. Okay, fine. I would like to pay 100 patients, but not 101. And of course, I don't want to pay 200. So I would like to know how much I'm going to pay, and that will be good for us. And this is the problem again that I was saying. That's overselling. If you told me you only will sell 100,000 and then you sell 200,000, and you can't tell me, no problem, we can sit again. Yes, but we have paid, when we will sit again, we have paid 200,000. That's, for us, that's a real problem. We need to compete, to have some confidence in each other, but that must be, we need that with these numbers. We have an example for you. You're lucky, I'm finishing, so you have to hear me somewhere. We have an example from here. In one hospital, really in 2 hospitals here in my region, we have now a new treatment, a biological treatment. We decide one indicator to record effects, and so that we can know if the patient is improving his health or not. If there are no evidence of that improvement, the manufacturer did not charge. Well, really, he gives us the same amount of products. Of course, we pay every pill, every product we buy, but they give us the same amount of product. This is a win-win, really. That was a particular case because this drug wasn't being used in our hospitals. There were many other drugs in the same group, and the competence was very hard. But now they are the main in the group in our bigger hospitals, and that's everything I have to say now. I'm sorry again by my bad English, but Ben asked me to participate. He's guilty. Okay, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Jose. That's really great to get your perspective on it as well. I've seen a lot of great questions coming in, so if anyone wants to ask any more about this sort of comparison between the two, that would be fantastic as well. The first question we've got for Mark is actually come from someone, Mark, that says they've worked with you before. His name is Chris Martin, and his question is that he knows that you're very forward-thinking in your attitude towards partnering with pharma for the benefit of patients. Unfortunately, he feels the majority of your colleagues in the NHS are not. And we assume this is because we're seen as interested in profits and our motives for partnering are questionable, i.e. lack of trust. Mark, can you share the thoughts on this and suggest what we as industry can do to change these perceptions?
Okay. Hi, Chris. That's a very fair question, and I think that your general analysis is absolutely right. Since moving back into a mainstream NHS role, which I'm now in, I've been, I continue to be quite surprised at some of the attitudes that colleagues display towards the pharmaceutical industry. So I think we need to begin by understanding why that is the case. And from speaking to some of the people that I work with quite closely, I think their interactions with pharma are very different to those that I had, particularly when I worked in my national role. They still receive lots of kind of cold calls or unwanted attention. There is still quite a large element of the kind of the pharmaceutical industry being the people who will pay for the sandwiches at the practice team meeting, and I think that quite a lot of that tends to fuel a perception which is quite different to my own, but is entirely legitimate and reflects the experiences that they've had of working with industry. So I think that is a little bit of a challenge. What can industry do about it? Well, I clearly suppose some of that is to continue on the journey that I know industry is already on, to move away from the kind of direct sales model, to move away from the kind of freebies and all that kind of thing, which I think has undoubtedly over the years harmed the reputation of the industry. I think perhaps more specifically, I think that it's about finding the people who are willing to have the conversations and building local relationships. But I would entirely agree with the basis of your question that it's still starting from a relatively low place, I suppose.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mark, for giving us your insights there. This question will be for both of you, but we'll start with Mark on this, and then Jose, if you wanted to give your answer afterwards. What do you think the #1 mistake that you see from drug manufacturers when they're trying to create value propositions is?
For me?
Mark, if you wanted to go ahead with that first, and then Jose will have your answer straight after that.
Okay, so probably I would say the #1 mistake, and it builds very much on what Jose talked about in his presentation, it is perhaps to fail to pay sufficient attention to benefits in the real world and the challenges in taking account of whether people take the medicines in the way that they are supposed to take them to get the benefits that are claimed for them. So that whole kind of real life versus clinical trials issue that Jose was talking about, I'm not sure I describe that as a mistake. That may be a significant challenge for the industry, more than a mistake. But nonetheless, I think it's a key issue because it means that benefits that are claimed are not necessarily the same as the benefits that are experienced.
Perfect. That's great. So, Jose, I'd be keen to hear your perspective on that as well. What do you think the #1 mistake is?
I think the #1 mistake is not to tell the truth. Because if I lost confidence with some company, it's very difficult to get that confidence again. This is a real situation that I have lived. Someone tells me that they are not presenting or they are not giving that some new treatment in some hospitals, or that they are waiting to our okay, and they don't do that. So that is very complicated for us. So, of course, to tell the truth, because later or sooner we are going to know what is going.
Perfect. Okay. That makes sense. So the message there really is making sure that pharma is 100% honest when they present with you, so you can make your decisions accordingly. Fantastic. Perfect. Thanks for that, Jose. Thanks, Mark. As another question, we've got, this is for both of you. Jose, maybe if you'd like to start with this one. Please name an example of a non-medicine service from pharma companies that you value. Non-medicine, so this is sort of a value beyond the pill, so perhaps it's a method of delivering a medicine, or something that's not actually the medicine itself.
I value, I really don't know, maybe when some help in I don't know information, but some help when we need to do some improvement in some hospitals. For example, to the monodosis, the implant some new work system. But always when we need it before than they offer it to us. Okay, we don't like to create a necessity when we don't have that necessity. I don't know if you understand me.
Okay, so you don't want them to create the problem. If you have the problem, you'll present them with it, and then you'll ask for the solution there.
Yes, that's the okay.
And your example was something within a hospital.
Yes, in a hospital, for example, we need to have a new, I don't know, a new equipment, or we have the necessity to have our patient in to do a trial, something, or especially some equipment, and they help us with that equipment. That's fantastic for us.
Sure, perfect. Mark, what would be your perspective on this?
Okay, so for me, the number one non-medicine service that I would value would be anything that can assist us to achieve a higher level of compliance with NICE guidance or with recognised and published quality standards. You know, that may be something around working with primary care and with our member practices here in Barnsley, but something that helps me to achieve a higher level of compliance. Perhaps something that reduces variation in practice, which is a big issue. That could be around case finding, individual patients. It could be around audit. It could be around something around practice facilitation. I think there's quite a lot of examples of collaborative projects and paid for services in that territory. But anything that helps deliver a higher level of compliance with NICE.
Okay, so it really is about compliance for you.
Well, compliance, but in the best sense of compliance with evidence-based quality standards that will improve the quality of health and healthcare.
Sure, perfect. That makes perfect sense. So another question for Jose here. Jose, the question is: do you see risk-sharing agreements being more appropriate to specific areas, i.e., specialist or expensive treatments?
No, I think that the main thing for risk sharing is that we can have a good indicator, okay? Because we can't have a problem if someone says that this is good and we say this is not good. Okay, so we need to have a very clear indicator that we can have a measurement, and then it's good for us and it's good for the pharmaceutical company. Of course, when it's expensive treatment, is better for us. But I don't have any specific area for that.
Okay, so it doesn't matter about the specialty treatment area. it's just as important for all areas. Is that right?
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Jose. Okay, so just looking for the next question to go there. So we've got a question coming in now, sort of on the medical devices side. So it'll be interesting to see your perspectives on this, Mark. If you wanted to go ahead with this question, which is how different are the requirements for medical devices and or software compared to pharmaceutical evaluations?
For me?
So medical devices and software compared to pharmaceutical interventions?
Evaluations.
Pharmaceutical evaluations, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just before I do that, I wanted to just make a point on the question before, if I may,
Sure.
which was about the risk sharing thing. My sense of risk sharing in the NHS is that it's required some kind of investment in IT or some kind of systems work to enable you to collect the information that supports the risk sharing agreement. So my guess would be that those are going to be more appropriately targeted on the larger budgetary impact medicines, whether that's because they're high-cost drugs or because of their overall budgetary impact. So that was just a point I wanted to make then on the question about risk sharing. In terms of medical devices and software versus pharmaceutical evaluations, no, I can't initially think of why there would be any significant difference between those two at all. I think that the evaluation of medicines is much more developed, I guess, because we've been doing that. NICE has been around looking at medicines for much longer. Evaluations of medical devices, for example, are probably much more early stage for us. So I guess the medical devices and software side of it is developing. It's still developing, but I wouldn't see any huge difference in the approach that you would wish to take.
Sure. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Mark. So this is another question which I'll pose to both of you. Are you familiar with any concrete public-private partnerships? And if so, which one can you think of?
So public-private partnerships, I would talk about one that I came across in my previous role where the industry and EU payers came together to develop shared value frameworks relating to particular illnesses and medicines that pharmaceutical companies were seeking to develop, early stage compounds, at the early stage of drugs, new medicines being developed, were tested out against this value framework to come to an earlier view as to whether a new medicine will be likely to deliver sufficient value in that condition, and secondly, and perhaps more importantly, to shape the clinical data that would be required to support evaluation by the HTA bodies and, as a consequence of that, market access. That would be one example of a public-private partnership. In truth, I'm not sure that there are too many of those around, but I think that would be one.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks for that, Mark. Jose, I'd be interested to get your perspective on this as well.
In pharmacy here in my region, I don't know what's actually anyone public-private partnership. We don't have here in Spain so much partnership, at least in pharmacy. I think there are in other fields, but I can't say really.
That's no problem. Perfect. Okay, so there aren't any currently going in the Extremadura region. I mean, is this something that you wouldn't look at then, or is this just something that doesn't happen yet?
I would like to have some public-private partnership, but I think it's over me. I think it will be the regional government directly who must sit down and talk about that.
Okay. So perhaps that's something that people should approach you directly with to sort of have that conversation. Sure. Perfect.
Ben,
So,
it's perhaps worth saying that if you reflect on the practice in the NHS at a kind of national level in respect to the Department of Health and the ABPI have been talking about this kind of collaborative agenda in this country, I would say, for a large number of years. I would have thought about a decade, if not even longer. And yet still the number of, you tend to find the same case studies, the same examples, the same areas, the same people, talking about the same kind of things. So I think that, there's a journey of kind of evolution, the journey of kind of cultural change in the NHS, the journey of engagement with payers that was hinted at by your survey question at the beginning, where payer engagement is still growing in importance for the industry, shows that I think this is quite a long-term project. Yeah, having said that, I'd be optimistic that I think we are making progress. I just don't think it's perhaps as fast as it could be, and perhaps needs to be.
Perfect. Okay. And a question that leads on for that, Mark, actually, quite conveniently, really, is: do you feel that payers have allowed enough time for pharmaceuticals to adjust research timelines to what seems to be new, higher demands for comparative evidence? If comparative evidence was offered more, would the reward make it worthwhile?
Well, I think timescales are fundamentally misaligned, and I think that is a real challenge. I worked briefly for AstraZeneca, and somebody asked me about what did they think would be the NHS's attitude towards treatments for hepatitis in 2017. This was in about 2009 or something like that. And I was totally stumped by the question, because I don't know, even in 2013, about what the NHS is going to think about very much in 2017, because we just don't work on those timescales. And yet, for industry, given the timescales to develop new medicines, those are absolutely, the timescales that you need to work with. So I think we are significantly challenged in terms of a relatively short-term, politically influenced, publicly financed health service versus the timescales of drugs development on a global basis. So I think that's one of the challenges. Should we pay more? Should we pay appropriately if we get better comparative data? Yes, absolutely we should. Will we? I don't know. But I think that we should. I think in a sense it goes back to the importance of developing only medicines that are going to meet the value that payers wish to see. And part of the reason, to go back to Jose's point about why are new medicines more expensive than the ones they replace, well, part of that reason, I think, is because it costs a lot of money to develop a new medicine, and comparatively small numbers of new medicines make it to the market and secure significant access. So as payers, we end up picking up the costs of all those failures. Necessarily, it can't be any different. So it just reinforces, to my mind, the importance of being collaborative as early as possible.
So you think early collaboration is the best way forward? Pharma should be trying to reach out to you.
It's not in our interests that the industry spends, $1 billion or whatever it is to bring to market a medicine that we don't think meets our needs. Now, it might be slightly more complicated than that, but yeah, I think as a payer, I think it's in our interests that you only bring to market medicines that are going to deliver value that we recognise, and we need to work together with you to help do that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it seems quite clear. I mean, is it fair to say that with yourself, you're one of the more forward-thinking payers that is willing to have those early conversations?
I genuinely wouldn't describe it. I don't think it's about being forward-thinking. I happen to fall into a national role which gave me the opportunity to meet colleagues in the pharmaceutical industry, and it was part of my remit to encourage the uptake of cost-effective medicines and to improve the strategic relationship between the NHS and industry. So the consequence of that job that I happened to do for a little while, I've gained a set of perspectives that are relatively unique, and that's what you get today. But I don't think that necessarily constitutes forward thinking, or I will leave that as a judgment for others to make.
Sure. Okay. Thanks for that, Mark. Jose, did you have any opinions on this?
Yes, I think that early collaboration is cheaper and is better, and is what we need, really, but not only with as payer, but pharmaceutical companies too. because we don't need a new Me Too drug, or we don't need a treatment for 1 or 2 months life in oncology with no quality of life. So if they told to us, do you need something here? That will be fine, because we could see, we could have what we need. And another thing that I think is our mistake as payer. We should say we are going to pay this, only this. If your treatment is going to be more expensive than this, don't waste more money in this, because we are not going to pay. That is our big mistake, administration mistake. But here in Spain, I think we are going to do something about it. Unless we are trying.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to let you know, we have just under 4 minutes left. So we are going to just see how many more questions we can squeeze in. So if you both could keep your answers fairly brief, that would be great. Jose, if we could start with you. In your presentation, you mentioned about the drug must be better. So how much better efficacy should a drug be to be classified as better for you?
That's very difficult. Really, that's the $1,000,000 question, because every time I say I need better drugs, how much better? I really don't know. Really, I don't know, because I must see the situation, the patient life, quality of life. I think it's very important that a patient that can't go out from home and with some treatment he can walk. That's fantastic. But I really don't know how to establish what is how much better. It's different in every treatment, every drug, every pathology.
Okay, perfect. Mark, we've got just under 2 minutes, so if you could give a very quick answer to that as well, that would be fantastic.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting that question to come to me at all, Ben. So I wasn't concentrating. Can you remind me of the question, please? Oh, how much better? Okay. Well, as a starting point, if it's going to cost 10% more money, I want to see 10% more benefit. But other than that, I think it's as Jose said, it's a very difficult question to answer. I suppose the other thing you might say is that in times of austerity, then the bar is understandably going to be raised a little bit harder. And if you wanted a really broad answer, apparently expenditure on cycle helmets delivers a return of £50 for every £1 that we spend as a nation getting our kids to wear cycle helmets. That's quite an impressive rate of return.
It is. Thanks for that, Mark. So I'm afraid that's all the questions we have time for. But I'd like to thank Mark and Jose very much for joining us today. You've both been great, and it's been fantastic to hear your insights. So just to conclude, Mark and Jose and a host of 10 more payers and HTA representatives will be joining us at the Payers Forum Europe in Berlin in October. So I'm going to send a link to the event to you all now. And if you could have a look at that, then you'll be able to see the website there, and I'd strongly recommend that you download the brochure also. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we're going to be signing off in just 2 seconds for you.
Okay.
Thank you all for joining us there. We've just sent the link out, so that should have gone to everyone now. So it's been great to have you all here, and please do have a look at the website and download the brochure there as well. Okay, thank you very much.